What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? How's everyone doing? So let's start this off with the elephant in the room. I know it's a holiday. I know it's, the markets are technically open, technically not open. This is going to be still just an hour that we're going to be focusing on prep for the week, regardless of when the market opens, regardless of how much, volume is going to be trading. It's still important to kind of kick off your week and be prepared for, in this case, Tuesday's open. Just to at least go into it with some aspect of a plan. And whether you're tuning in here live or you're watching this back, tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, as you're doing your prep, as you're trying to, understand what the heck is going on in these markets, a lot of us are probably in that same boat where after a week like last week, where you had, what we were hoping for being a break of this, something that I would like to call the balance range from hell of last week. I was really hoping, if you guys remember last Sunday, we were going to talk about NVIDIA earnings. We were going to talk about PCE. And if I was a betting man, and I'm sure a little bit of all of us kind of are in that mindset, I would have bet the house on NVIDIA or PCE breaking this balance range. Unfortunately, we got absolutely none of that. In fact, we are still stuck in the exact same area that we had the conversation last Sunday with. Very much, with all the different news and data and bond auctions and NVIDIA to either send us to an all-time high or send us out of this range down to maybe go retest 5,600, 5,500, just something to break us out of this balance. We just didn't get it. And for me, I guess I was wrong. I was expecting us to potentially leave this range. And if it wasn't for, our 401ks basically buying the all-time high almost, with that little run we had into the close on Friday, it would have been a pretty lackluster week. Not a lot of really would have happened. And really there was nothing to show for it. We were still stuck in the same, call it a 50-point range that we had been trading in for weeks, at least the last 2 weeks. So as we're kind of, looking at this week and trying to make a plan, at least from the perspective of the indices, not a lot has changed. There's not a lot of new information or, new data that, we need to, really look out for at this point until we get the potentially the first cut from the Fed here in a few weeks. There's not a ton that's really telling me, hey, we're going to break this balance. But that also means since it's not potentially going to be driven by news or data, that I may take that break of balance, if it's not an event catalyst that does it, with some seriousness, especially as volume returns to this market in the next coming weeks. We have a holiday tomorrow. But I expect real traders and real volume to return to this market by next Monday. I would expect a lot of desks to be back, a lot of institutional positions being established, in the early part of this week that have some legs to them, that have a sense of direction of where we're going into, kind of the, for lack of a better word, just a more volatile seasonality time of the year, being September and October, and into an election cycle here in the United States where anything can happen, as Hogue likes to say. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. There's definitely going to be a lot of different things I think that can potentially happen in the next couple of weeks. But when we're looking at the charts more specifically around ES or around the S&P, I had said this one kicked things off, but we're still in balance. I drew last week's profile here to kind of give us a semblance of, where are we? But if you look back even 2 weeks, we haven't left this range. We're still sitting below 5,700, and we haven't seen any enthusiasm from buyers really looking to sell us under 5,600. So you're stuck in a 100-point range, not even. When we look at the the value area from last week. In fact, we can even extend this to this entire balance range, and you get my logic of this is a balance range from hell. We can just not seem to want to leave this. And what that tells me, without really doing a ton of prep or really focusing on, hey, what am I looking to trade or how am I looking to trade this week? You know, you look at this and you kind of take a step back and say, well, there's not a lot to do outside of playing the ranges or waiting for us to break this sense of balance that we are in. I think if you're hearing any ringing in the background, I'm hearing it too in my ears. I don't know what's going on. It doesn't do this when I'm on TopstepTV, but for some reason, part of my, I think my gain in my mic, I need to continue to play around with and adjust. I am hearing it too. So I think if you're hearing it in headphones, that's probably why. But yeah, I'm going to get that fixed. I'll continue to play around with it after I jump off here. But yeah, as far as this week, guys, like I was really kind of describing when we came on air, when you're in a balance area like this almost qualifies to me as a no trade zone, if you will, or an area I'm not looking to potentially do a whole lot in. And when I kind of drill that down further, I'm not saying don't place trades, don't make the range play on the edges of here, because that would have paid you a lot of money in the last 2 weeks. Playing the edges definitely has been working. So definitely still is, you know, an area that I'd be looking to engage with until we get that break of balance. But when I say do not trade, a do not trade zone for me for this week is probably going to be sitting around 56.20 to 56.40. And when I say do not trade, that means I'm happily going to make trades, but I'm probably not looking to initiate or establish a position when ES is trading basically around that point of control. If you remember last week, we had talked about 56.30 being my pivot for the week. And it held true once again of kind of being a support and resistance area, an area where we found some sellers if we were able to break that semblance of a point of control. And we found buyers pretty much in the low 600s all week. So that pivot pretty much worked as far as if you were looking for, hey, where could I be looking to sell? Or if I was in a larger range sell from the top, you know, where could I start peeling some off? Well, right around 56.30, because that definitely acted as an area that may make you pull your hair out a little bit if you were sitting in trades, just kind of waiting for something to happen. And it makes sense with all the volume we pretty much traded between 30 and 40 last week, and the point of control being almost exactly around 56.30, where we established the pivot. So for me, looking at ES, looking at, you know, what's on the docket for this week, the same rules apply. If you watch last week's market prep, nothing is going to change. I'm still going to be using right around that 56.30 level as kind of my, you know, looking to sell versus looking to buy bias as far as intraday. And when I say that, once again, that doesn't mean I'm looking to, you know, hey, if we break 56.10, I'm looking to sell the farm on it. It just means it's an area where I would say sellers are more in control, perhaps for a trip further back down, retesting those lows. And if we could hold above it, then that's where, you know, we'd be continuing to look. Do we make a push towards 5,700, 57.30, and kind of go retest the all-time highs? Oops, I hit the wrong button. Yep, I did. Anyway, looking for air horns, new all-time highs, things like that. If we can continue to build above this 56.50 area that we're most likely going to open around tonight's session, with that type of prep or with how we're thinking about this, you know, kind of throw out tonight and even majority of the half day kind of tomorrow that futures are open. It's just going to be a weird session. There's going to be nobody trading this. I mean, if you want to, by all means, go for it. But this, I'm not going to be placing a single trade until the market opens on Tuesday morning. It's just a classic holiday. There's nothing to do. You know, if you really wanted to, if you can scalp a few points, if you can play these edges, that's probably, you know, your best bet if you are going to be trading tonight. Or if some of our European friends or Asia Pacific friends, or, you know, your markets are still going to be open tomorrow. So if you're trading DAX or you're trading something else, you know, the Nikkei, just whatever it may be, a good rule I would say to still be, you know, keeping an eye out for is, where is ES still trading? Are we at the top end of the range? You know, just have an idea of where we are trading, regardless of, you know, maybe what instrument you're looking to trade in the next, I would say, 24 hours until the US markets reopen. But the same logic applies. Until we kind of get over 56.70 with some enthusiasm, there's just not a ton to do here. It's the same It's the same, area of balance that we've been in, and it doesn't really mean that this is a great trade location. It doesn't mean it's a great place to potentially enter anything right now. It's just kind of a market still waiting for not necessarily new information, but it's just kind of waiting and sitting around. So nothing for me that I'm really looking to. If we were to jump to NQ real quick, you see a similar profile as far as the last couple of weeks. But if we were to drag back to Sunday, you see a very similar balanced profile. Not a lot happened. Same thing. It's just a very balanced auction right now. Like I said, with Nvidia last week, I really thought we were going to fall out of this. I really thought we were going to potentially break this and go retest, even down into the 18,000s in NQ. We didn't. I think I was calling, if I was looking for downside, it almost was a previous point of control, I believe, when we were looking at a longer term. It wasn't a point of control. It was a low volume node, I believe, that had an area to the downside that you could be targeting if you caught this swing high on a good short. Where could you look to potentially find buyers again? It was going to be around 19,200. So even when we got that weakness, and I think it was Thursday afternoon, somebody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Thursday was when we had that kind of relatively scary sell down towards the end of the day, where we were just kind of chopping and balancing near the highs of the day. And then someone stepped their foot on the gas and sold us down on NQ like 300 points in 90 minutes. And, all the fear was kind of back into this market for 5 minutes until buyers, regained control during power hour. But you got that full range basically of the last 2 weeks once again, where we were sitting near the highs. You really weren't finding a lot of interest I think when we were having this conversation last Sunday, we were not finding any buyers' interest above 19,900. Well, this week we really did not find any enthusiastic buyers on NQ above 19,700. And basically right where we closed around 600. But we kind of saw passive buyers repeatedly step in around the 700 level on NQ, and no surprise why. You have a low volume node there, and you have a very large high volume node point of control right around where we closed, that 600 level. So the market, once again, finding an area of no interest, or trading an area of no interest in the auction basically, and returning to an area of value. When we've been talking about volume profile in the past on these shows, that's one thing to always look for. If you're entering in a low volume node, where you might find resistance, well, it's going to be at a high volume node, a high volume edge, or a point of control, something where it is a more balanced section of the auction where there is a lot of interest in transacting, buying and selling. So for us, like I said, we saw that a few times last week where we kind of came up, peaked above 700, and then a seller came in, pushed us back down, back towards 600, or in the latter parts of last week, back in the 400s until, we kind of had that post Nvidia run up Wednesday afternoon. And that continued a little bit into Thursday before, obviously we had that larger sell. And then pretty much Friday, if you kind of look at the week profile, we kind of balanced. And as I said, if you saw, or if you were confused by whatever that last 30 minutes was in the indices during power hour on Friday, you saw what is typically why you'll never catch me trading a Friday at the end of the month, because you get these wild moves like that. And a lot of the time they are going to be to the north side, because that is a lot of the passive flows that can come into the market. That's your 401k basically just buying in the last few minutes there and is pushing us higher. So you got that kind of move, and I'm sure there were some crazy trades that some people made in those last 10 minutes. I'm sure there was a lot of money to be had on the table, but for me personally, it's just, you see the power of that. And if you try to, and there's no point in even trying to, short it, because those are just pure buy orders from everybody and their mother's 401k pushing us higher. But all it really did was push us back towards the point of control on the week. So it really didn't do a whole lot. And like I said, it really didn't change any decision making for me. We still need to kind of wait and see if we're going to break this balance anytime soon. Maybe we may not even this whole week. It could take, real traders coming back into this market next week when volume returns and we kind of get some more normalcy. Everyone's back in school. The holidays are over. Everyone is, everyone's back at the desk. And I'm sure even, I think I saw D in the chat too. All of our UK and European friends are back from holiday. Finally, they're lovely, sometimes 2 months sabbatical. I wish we had here in the US in the summer, that everyone just, doesn't even bother to set an out of office because you're not going to respond anyway for all of our 9-to-5ers out there. I've never had that in this world, or in my old world. But we are open. So I expect us to be low volume, to potentially not really leave this range tonight or as well as tomorrow as futures are open. I would imagine we really are going to be kind of pinned around, 19,600 and 56, not really breaking too far. My guess is from 5660 to 5640, 5630 in ES, pretty much probably a 100-point range, I would imagine at the most. And NQ, it really wouldn't make a ton of sense for us to drift too far until the market opens on Tuesday. So as I said earlier, if you're going to trade this, Godspeed, but not something I'm really looking to do, but it does make sense to kind of make a plan around it. So we are opening a little bit higher here. Let's jump back to ES. Yeah, same thing as we talked about, top of the range. If I was looking for, upside, I think it's pretty normal here. Where would we be going? Well, we'd probably go make a new all-time high. If we did get some weakness and we start to potentially break this range to the downside, where's an area where you might find buyers again is going to probably be around 5480, 5485, cleaning up some of these pre-market single prints that we still had from whatever news release was a couple weeks ago at this point. And I would respect this break of balance whenever we do finally get it. It's not something I'd be looking to fade unless we came back into this range. If we pierce above 5,700, unless we came back towards 5,670, I'm probably not really looking for shorts. I would expect us to go make a new all-time high. And the same thing on NQ. If we can get above 20,000, again, with some enthusiasm, I'm all on that train. It doesn't make any sense to fade that. If when we do break this balance, I'd be trying to go with that move because it's a multi-week balance. And if it's not news driven, by all means, that's probably real buyers, real players trying to push us higher or push us lower. So no surprise here, super low volume. Nothing too crazy as we kick off the Globex Open. As we know, it's a holiday. I really don't expect anything to, happen unless something happens overseas or, Bank of Japan decides they want to do something again. But I would imagine it's pretty quiet until we come back here for fast markets on Tuesday. Let's jump over to GC. GC, if I recall, was still trading pretty much in balance for last week. Very similar to kind of what we talked about again on Market Kickoff last Sunday was us. Do we find any selling, really above 53, 2,500. And we really didn't. We pretty much did a very similar play that we did the previous week. Once again, gold is now trading in a 2-week balance, the same way the indices are. We got above 2,500 and, you've been finding some good rotational trades, but there hasn't been a ton of interest going to trade near 5,600 or going on a, a very steep, 4-hour trend to the upside and continuing to make new highs. It very much has been kind of testing the upper limits of that balance and then falling back into range, falling back towards the point of control, falling back towards 2540, which is a level I think we've been talking about now for almost 3 weeks. So the same thing is true here. If I was trading gold this week, you'd be looking for potentially longs between this area, 2530 down to 2520. Kind of that bottom of last week's range, and then potentially looking to traverse that entire week's value back towards 2560, and then seeing, hey, if we can get some legs, do we go break this new all-time high again at 2570? If we continue to see selling, you're probably going to find motivated buyers again around 2510 to 2500, just like we talked about last week. When you're using volume profile, and even if you were to, like I did, for the multi-week balance on ES, if you were to drag this back towards kind of when we made this breakout to 2,500 or even the last, let's call this 2 weeks, you see a pretty balanced auction, a very D-shaped profile here on gold and basically trading between this 2530 to 2557 range. So same thing, until we kind of break out of this balance, you want to play the edges. You want to play those low volume nodes. You would be looking for, like I said, that rebid around 2520 down to 2500, where it would make sense that we would probably find buyers there again, just like we have for the last couple of weeks. So same thing on gold. I'm probably still looking to, I'm still pretty bullish on gold. I would say, you guys know me, I don't trade it actively, but it's hard to kind of look at this and say, yeah, we're finding a lot of interest back below 2,500. I'm looking to, sell this day in and day out. I think these are, you're looking for dips to buy rather than reoffers to go sell. And let's take a look at CL. As I recall, last Sunday, yeah, it did exactly what we were talking about. I had kind of said as Crude was going to be a tougher instrument to really get a good read on. It had just been kind of violently, not even say violently range bound, but just violently choppy and, pretty directional in a lot of different ways. And it was hard to really, for me personally, as someone who doesn't trade it day in and day out, or really even look at the charts, on a week by week basis, to really get an edge on, hey, which direction would I be leaning outside of, I could see us returning back towards 77. And that's where you might find sellers again, just from a very elementary level of like, hey, I don't trade this, but I don't really look at it, but just using volume profile, like where, we bounced off this low volume edge, this older one, I think we were talking about down here around 71 when Globex opened on, I think we were trading, maybe we were trading a little higher. Maybe it was like 74 we were trading. I don't remember where we opened last Sunday, but we were saying, hey, we bounced off a shorter time frame low. Where could we potentially find sellers again? Well, it would be right around 77. I think we were talking about this high volume node here. And then now we're continuing to kind of bounce in this range between 74 and 77. So the same thing is true here. Does Crude go try to make a new low, finally break back into the low 70s, 71, maybe even make a run at that? No, probably doesn't make a run to break 70, but the same thing. If we were trading this, if we were looking at this, where would you find buyers again? The same thing of last week's, kind of the lower part of, I guess it was the end of, it wasn't last week. It was right before that. So like 2 Fridays ago, back towards 72, 73, and be looking for potentially buyers to step in. And then do we continue this kind of wider range of balance that we were kind of in? Let me go back to actually show you last week's range. Yeah, pretty wide distribution between 77 and 73. It's just like last week. I don't have a big edge here on gold, or not gold, on Crude. It really is kind of just violently, range bound, and it's really hard to gauge direction with all the things that can happen and all the things that can move this, especially the, the Wednesday Crude inventories, D? I know that's your favorite thing in the world. So yeah, do we kind of continue to hold this 73, 72, 80 level and then continue to kind of, fill out some of this range between 77 and 73? That's probably what I'd be looking to play. If I was to trade it. If we were to lose this, yeah, you by all means go fade it down to 71. See, hey, did we actually finally break this low of the 70s? Maybe go retest 69 and some of the other older time frame stuff going back. That would be a long time now because Crude rolled over. So yeah, that's where I'd be playing it then. If you'd be looking for that low to potentially hold and us continue to kind of be range bound here in Crude. Not something, like I said, guys, for me that I trade. That looks pretty dang choppy, if I do say so myself. That doesn't look like a market with a ton of, direction that I feel confident entering anything as far as a more swing time frame type move. It just is very much balancing in a much wider range than the indices are right now. But yeah, how's everyone else been trading this before I kind of jump into the light news that we have this week, as well as the earnings that nobody really cares about, but we're going to talk about probably a couple names that are on there too. Crude D has been a mess. Even me doing this prep for the last couple of weeks and seeing it, I'm like, I don't know how you people trade this sometimes. It's just hard to really feel confident in any sort of entry. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how everyone else has been trading this range bound, few weeks of balance in the indices. It has been, I've had some very good trades and some very bad trades. And that's what you get when you're kind of playing the edges and hoping for the best, or you make a mistake and you're entering in value, finally looking for the breakout, and then it just chops you for hours and you're stuck in trades. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I doubt we get the break of balance to start this week, but like I said, I really hope we finally can, because I'm not a big range bound trader. I like momentum a little more than playing the edges, but this has been a not necessarily nightmare to trade, but I'm just waiting for something to change. And who knows, maybe some of the lighter news that we have this week, now that PCE is behind us, now that, NVIDIA's earnings and the CEO of SPY is, on the back burner here, we can focus on new information, and maybe the market finally wants to push us off a cliff or go make a new all-time high, and we continue to not be range bound. But yeah, I had a good week, but range weeks and, breaking balance, it's tough. You definitely can get caught on the wrong side of it if you're not careful, if you're not true to your stops and you're trying to play the breakout and then it falls back into range. It's just, it can be a tough trade at times. But we have a pretty standard, I would say, news docket of all the usual releases that we can, expect. You have ISM, you've got some bond auctions to kick us off this week. I would say now that earnings season is pretty much behind us, and now we're waiting for, what is the Fed going to do next? I would say all eyes, even the old, I mean, I really think we can say, with, I guess, a little tongue in cheek here, is that inflation has been defeated. As much as I think the average person and me still getting groceries and doing things, I don't feel that way, but the market seems to be, to quote Bill Belichick, we're on to Cincinnati. Very much with, I would say, inflation related data. It just seems to be very muted. If you were looking at the PCE reaction, I know it came in right on par, but it was one of the most muted reactions, I would say, in the last couple of years of watching the inflation data and watching the algos kind of trade it. It almost nothing happened. It was very, almost a pathetic reaction. So it just is a weird mindset that I'm kind of keeping in the back of my head of just, okay, is the market really is this just not driving volatility the way it did the last couple of years? Are we moving more now, which you could expect with the Fed potentially cutting, is going to be not inflation data, jobs data, unemployment data. That may kind of now be the what everyone is really watching and looking for, because that pretty much would continue the Fed's, I guess, confidence in, a weaker labor market and, unemployment and all these other things. That is probably how they're looking at potentially guiding some of their, cut decisions going forward. So I think the JOLTS numbers this week, as well as, what is it? We still have ISM, non-farm. We have NFP on Friday, the unemployment rate. So does the market kind of shift the importance from inflation data, now really all eyes on the employment data going forward? I have a weird thing with the PCE reaction on Friday that may be what we're starting to kind of see, that the market may start to care only about, those data releases with a little more enthusiasm than it did, CPI and PPI and some of these others the last few months and years that we've been kind of in this cycle. So that's kind of what I'd be looking for. And like I said, that's more, in my head. I don't know if that's actually going to hold true as we get, more CPI, or God forbid it comes in hot in any of these next few months and inflation is not defeated. But I think that's where you're starting to still see pain, is more in the labor market and, all these weird jobs revisions that we had, I think 2 weeks ago, and, how some of that data can kind of be skewed or adjusted or looked at. So I think that's maybe where the market is going to start caring more, or having a perspective on the reaction. So outside of that, you've got PMI, you have Bank of Canada giving a interest rate decision as well. So that will be interesting, just to kind of see what is the Bank of Canada to do. Do they continue to cut rates? They had just done their first cut. I believe it was last month. Could have been more than that off the top of my head, but we'll start to see, do some of these central banks around the world continue their cutting cycle? Does in the future, does the Bank of Japan actually raise rates? We will we will see, since they walked back that statement a few weeks ago. But yeah, it's a pretty light week in terms of, you know, news and data, but there are a lot of important ones I think that can definitely still move the market. So like we said, PMI, but my eyes are going to be Friday for NFP and the unemployment rate, probably more than anything. That may be an important data point that the Fed could use to decide, is it 25 basis points? Is it 100 basis points still this year? We should start getting all of those Fed funds futures bets continuing this week and all up into the Fed when the Fed makes their first cut here. I think not next week, the week after, potentially during FOMC. So yeah, not necessarily a light news week or light data week, but definitely some shifting, I think, into the importance of some of these compared to potentially how much they were important in the past. And if I'm forgetting any that someone else feels is important, feel free to chime in. I think I hit on all the important ones. No other crazy bond auctions. 8-week. Yep. Okay. So that's pretty much it there. And everyone hang on for a second. Sorry, someone came to my door. My dog's going to decide to bark. All right. On the earnings front, I would say with a lot of confidence that earnings season is over, at least for another few weeks until the banks are once again back in cycle, I think in October. But we'll get a little vacation here from, you know, any single stock, I would say, that can move the market the way NVIDIA did after hours on Wednesday and into the overnight Thursday night. Wednesday evening into the pre-market on Thursday. So it's a pretty light week. If you pay attention to these earnings, there's nothing that really jumps out as far as these names. You've got some tech names on Tuesday after the close with Zscaler, with Asana, GitLab, excuse me. The other important one, just because of what, not Dollar Tree, it's a Family Dollar Store. One of the other dollar store ones reported last week and had pretty poor earnings, and actually basically had stated, you know, the, whatever you would call it, the lower income consumer that they typically service was feeling some pain, and they guided down. And someone can please confirm who it was, because now it's going to drive me nuts. So there are all the different dollar stores out there. But Dollar Tree reports Wednesday morning. So same thing. Do they potentially guide down? Are they seeing the same type of weakness that Dollar General, I think that's who it was talking about last week during their earnings releases? And we saw pretty positive earnings from Affirm. And I made the joke last week that if we saw positive earnings from Affirm, that I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing in theory. If, you know, the way that they are making their money a lot of the time is on people not necessarily making payments on buy now, pay later type situations, and some of the agreements they have with other companies to service their e-commerce sites through buy now, pay later. But Affirm actually reported a pretty good earnings. So it'd be interesting to see potentially how the lower income consumer is continuing to feel when we are having these victory laps from our talking feds, that inflation has been defeated, and, you know, heading into a election cycle as well. When those type of people are feeling pain and are still struggling and, you know, not necessarily able to afford certain things, then, you know, that's pretty telling too. But that's kind of the only other important one that I really see here. Like I said, we really are in the last gas of earnings releases for this quarter, and it'll pick up again, I believe, in October as we do this song and dance one more time with the banks, followed by big tech and the Mag 7 and, you know, Tim Apple to save us once again. But yeah, pretty light week on that front. Nothing else really jumping out. Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, on the options front, we are looking at our TraderAid models here. So this is our gamma exposure for SPX options. If you are new or you haven't been, you know, tuning in when sometimes I scream and yell in the chat on TopstepTV, one of the many tools that I use in my trading is going to be to view and understand SPX options activity, because if you've been living under a rock, you would know on a 0 DTE, so 0 days to expiration, meaning they are bought and sold in the same session, That makes up a good chunk of the S&P's volume these days. It pretty much moves the market. If you were watching Friday's close, you know the only people that were actively buying the SPOOs into the last 10 minutes was options traders and our 401ks. So it's a very important a very important thing. I think that if you're trading the indices, that you should be paying attention to. But what gamma exposure really is looking at, without getting in the weeds, think of it as just large pools of liquidity that is being utilized via options data that can potentially act as magnets in the market as far as intraday price action. So looking at the gamma exposure, this is Friday. This is at the close on Friday. So once again, this is a little bit skewed because you got to remove this screenshot does not remove what was still about to expire on Friday in the last 15 minutes after close. So a little grain of salt with these, but it still gives us, this one in particular is giving us the longer term chain perspective on, where that gamma exposure lies. And right now it's still much like last week and the previous week to the upside. So they're still going to potentially act as large magnets to pull price action higher towards the all-time high and maybe even breaking a new all-time high. We're seeing the largest net gamma all the way up to 57.50, let's call it, on SPX. So the spread is probably going to be around 10 to 15 points. I think it was almost 18 points towards the end of last week. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. But yeah, that's probably where the spread's going to be majority of this week, probably around 15 points, I would guess. But we're still seeing all of that gamma interest, or not necessarily interest, but the gamma exposure higher. And when we have looked at this the last few weeks, it could be why we've been in such balance. There's not when you look at this also with the, I guess the total or the gross, not necessarily the net being this top one, but if you look at it with the gross as well, so factoring in the total across the board of negative gamma with positive gamma, you do see a good reason probably why we've been stuck in this balance for the last couple of weeks is, you do see a very large negative gamma exposure down toward 5,600, and you see a very similar size one up to 5,700. So naturally, when you see two of the same size pools of liquidity, it almost is going to not necessarily act like a magnet, but almost is going to pin us between them at times, which is pretty much what we've been doing. So until this shifts, until we start to see, sellers really get momentum and we see a lot of put buying and, different things on the zero DTEs, we're probably still going to be stuck in this balance for the foreseeable future. Something's got to change, and you just haven't seen it on the options chain necessarily yet. So I'd be looking, like I said, how does this shift? Not necessarily tomorrow, but Tuesday. Are we continuing to see, now that NVIDIA and PCE and everything's kind of behind us and we're back in this range, do they start to make bets at us going as people start to come back to the desks and, traders and volume return to this market? Do they try to make a run to go make a new all-time high before we do anything else? It's very possible. And the gamma exposure definitely supports higher prices as well. But knowing that there is still some of that downside risk, and you saw a lot of passive selling at times last week near the top of the range, anything can happen. And that's pretty much how I'm going into this week. Like I said, I'm not looking to potentially really want to initiate trades in the middle of this range. I'm really looking for us to kind of break this balance. That's really the truth. You talk to any trader, that a lot of them would probably say something similar. Until we kind of leave this range, it's hard to really have any sort of directional bias or perspective. You just are looking to get on side of whatever team wins at the end of the day. I hope both teams have fun, but I'm ready to jump on the bandwagon of whichever one actually wins this little tug of war that we've been in for 2 weeks. Jumping back to the charts here, and then I'll jump into some questions if there are any. I know it's, like I said, this is going to be probably a quieter market prep. So I hope anyone who's tuning in, not live, but later, either tomorrow or, Tuesday morning before the market opens, that you get some value out of this. And hopefully we are not still trading in this range. I'm assuming we are, but yeah, there's not a ton's probably going to happen tonight, as we have talked about, but looking for any sort of edge this week, it really comes down to, can we break out of this 610 area? Can we start to push price higher than 56.60? Or are we just going to open Monday in the same place we've been trading at for 2 weeks? I hope not. So I'm going to start looking at some questions here. How do I get volume profile on the right side of my screen on my charts? So on TopstepX, this is the visible range volume profile. And these are my settings for ES as well as, I believe, NQ, because I think I have these pretty much locked on each one. But I keep my row size based on ticks, and I keep my rows pretty small. And then I do total volume. I don't do delta or up down. And then you can tweak your value area to whatever you see fit. I use the standard 70% rule to kind of guide it. But a lot of the time on my other charts, my motive wave charts, I usually keep everything one color just because it's aesthetically pleasing to me. But you can really make it however you want. Like I said, I pretty much just focus on one main color. But the logic is with volume profile, it doesn't necessarily matter because I use low volume nodes more than I do the value area lows at times to kind of guide my trades. And you can visually understand where majority of the volume is taking place and where the, in theory, the 15 and 15%. So that if you were doing the 70 rule, then you would know that the top section or the bottom section in I guess this one might make more sense for this. If I zoom in. So if you're using the 70-30 rule, then you would have 70% of your volume on like a D-shaped profile like this is going to take place almost in the center. And then you have your 15% on each side. So you can do that. A lot of the time, like I said, I just use one color because it just becomes less noise on the chart. And it just looks a little nicer personally, but to each their own. But you can kind of get an idea, or at least break out if you haven't been trading volume profile as an indicator, or if you haven't been using it in your trading before, I'd recommend keeping your colors a little separate just so you can visually understand it, probably a little different. And when you get comfortable, you should be able to kind of identify those low volume edges and where the value area actually is and where those breaks in theory, would take place. So, but yeah, that's kind of the gist of at least how I have it set up. But I use a visible range on just about every single chart that I trade on, just because it allows you to quickly jump between timeframes and you can easily see the volume by price that occurred for that price range. So if I were to jump to like a 4-hour chart, my visible range is going to adjust for all of the volume that occurs for all of these candles on screen. And every time I do this, I look at this value area, this balance range that we are in, and I just want to pull my hair out. I like to trade markets in motion. I'm not the Nick Dolby range trader that just likes to carve up the edges and make money on both sides. I need momentum in either direction. Can we take profit partially in TopstepX? I guess depends what you mean by that. You can manage your positions how you see fit. You can use hotkeys to kind of scale in and scale out of positions as well. Since we released the new hotkey features like 2 weeks ago now, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago. But yeah, you can do that, or you could just change your sizing yourself and just kind of scale in and out manually. There's a lot of different ways to do it. It just kind of depends on your style, your confidence in the trade as well, and also your plan for said trade. If you entered with a lot of size and you're trying to, take profit as you go, I mean, you can do that. Just really depends on kind of what your goal was with the trade. So if you have questions, guys, feel free to throw them in the chat. We've got some time here. We said the markets are dead. We're in balance. There's no crazy news this week. The Nvidia is behind us. So we've got some time here. As I said, I'm not going to be actively looking to trade until Tuesday morning. But everyone who's here live, thank you guys for taking a quick break out of your Labor Day weekend to hang out with me. I was planning on doing my market prep tomorrow, but here we are getting it all done for you guys, and hopefully a recording will continue to push out after this is over. And you can reference back to this too, as well as any of my previous ones. If even last week may be valuable if you missed it. Just because we're in the same range, a lot of the levels that I was talking about or areas of interest that I'd be looking to enter or take profit are going to hold true. So it definitely, if you missed last week's prep, go check it out. Definitely is going to be another deep dive into the same value area that we cannot break, but we'll give you a good perspective of how I was thinking about this when we were in a 1 week balance. And now you're seeing, okay, we're in 2 weeks of the same balance. So you can kind of see how over time you can use volume profile to still make assumptions, make range plays, whatever it is, but just have a plan. And, once TopsetX releases another volume profile indicator that allows you to kind of set, okay, I want to look at 1 month, I want to look at 1 week. You can kind of have that rolling week as well of different, value areas in a volume profile. And something that I do, or I used to do before I, have a tool that basically spits these out for me. But you basically then can draw boxes of those value areas, and you can find larger areas of balance that the market is in. So even in theory, if we're not in this tight of a range of 30, 40 points like we are in ES, you could be in a 120 point balance or whatever that you've now drawn, and you've found multi-weeks of overlapping value with volume profile. And then you can use that to kind of find a more longer time frame or a swing time frame, area of balance that we can be in, where you could be, once again, looking to fade edges, or maybe taking, a swing long or swing short at the top end of that value over a multi-week balance with micros, like I used to do in my personal account, where I would swing a few micros that way, looking for that full multi-week traverse of value as well. Since I know we can't hold positions overnight in Topsetp, but that's a way you can start to use volume profile to kind of understand on a longer time frame, where are we trading, and over the last month, hey, if I was to buy the bottom of this, could I potentially ride this the entire way towards the top or towards the point of control? That's how I've always kind of traded on a longer time frame, is using those larger, balance areas. So even like something like this on my screen, where if you were to do this over the course of a few weeks and you had, okay, maybe not the best example here, but you could in theory draw a box around these different value areas and then use that as like, okay, hey, yeah, now that value area is 710 to 610. That's a 100-point range that I could potentially looking to swing a trade rather than just day trade it for 5 minutes. So that's another concept that we can start to talk more about as we get, as I continue to introduce some of these concepts of volume profile. But it's a way that you can continue to, almost build your own balance ranges with the, to make your prep quick. And then you start to do things like I do, where we had talked about this in the beginning, where, what's a do not enter trade range? Well, it's probably right around this, 5650 to 5630 level, where I probably don't have a ton of plans to initiate a trade necessarily in there. I will continue to ride a trade in that range, but that's not an area right now that I'm looking to enter one, because it's a coin flip. It really is. When you have this large of a, point of control or a high volume node, and you have a multi-week balance, it's a coin flip. So you can start to stay out of ranges like that, so you don't get chopped up is kind of my logic that I'm alluding to. Yes. So I do on my motive wave charts, if you've seen them in the past or you saw them on TopstepTV before, I use a delta by price as well next to my volume profile. So what that is basically describing is the delta volume at a specific price point. So if you've listened on the show and you hear me and Hogue talk about icebergs or talk about absorption, that's a tool that it basically allows you to not necessarily see it, but you can understand that if you're seeing, a ton of negative delta, near a low, but price isn't necessarily breaking the, the initial balance or the low of the day, whatever it is, but you're seeing that negative delta start to stack up near a low like that. What that's really telling you in theory is that, sellers are basically just hitting repeatedly, and buyers are just sitting on the bid and just basically giving them all they want to sell at that level, but price isn't moving any lower. So you're seeing that type of absorption or an iceberg at that. So what delta by price kind of is doing is giving you that indication that you have a ton of selling going on, but price isn't moving. So potentially they're getting absorbed, but at the same time, if that level were to finally break, that's where you can see a pretty violent stop run at times. So in Motive Wave, like I said, I use delta by price to kind of guide and just visualize those type of things happening in the market that you can really only see with like time and sales, or you can see them with Bookmap, but it's just another way to visualize that type of buying and selling in the auction. And the hope is that Topstep X gets that in the short term. I keep being told it's on the list and it's going to come, and I would make my life so much easier. It'd be really cool if we can get that inside of Topstep X too. So I'm hopeful that will get done by the engineers that are behind the scenes, I think, listening and taking all of that feedback. But yeah, that's the tool that you've probably have seen, and hopefully we get a version of that inside of Topstep X, since we do talk about delta so much, and Hogue and I kind of nerd out on it all the time. So I hope that we can get that here soon, because I think it's a really, really invaluable tool that, not necessarily can make you a better trader, but it can give you things that are happening behind the scenes without you having to sit there and watch time and sales like a hawk to really, and then still have to still know what you're seeing. Cause I think that's another battle that we do face as traders too. You can have a ton of good information, but can you actually articulate to yourself the right way of what's happening? Because I had that same problem with trying to understand gamma exposure, and then it became like, this is just too much information, because I think I'm seeing something in the data as it's coming in real time, but it just became so much noise because I realized I was reading like half of the picture, but in theory, then my output of what I was really going to do with that information was the wrong direction, because I thought I really understood it, but it's almost like the reverse. It's almost like you have it backwards kind of thing. So some of these concepts can be almost like information paralysis, but I personally really like delta by price. And I know Jay is a big delta trader too. I know he's in the chat. All right, another question here. Would you take a trade specifically off a low volume node, or do they help you I cannot speak today. Or do they help you focus to see if you have a specific entry signal? So low volume nodes can be some of the best potential trade entries, because price, but it also can blow up in your face really quick. I guess that's the best way to kind of explain this. What a low volume node tells you in theory. So if you can see my charts here, it looks like you can. If you can see this low volume edge down here between 5430 and let's call it 5400, what that really is saying is there was not much of an auction down at those price levels in the whatever time frame you're looking at. So going back towards whatever this is, August 13th, August 14th, when we were trading there, price moved very quickly through it. But we got a retest on this wick right here, back towards 5440. So low volume nodes in theory can be very good trade entries, just because price doesn't spend a lot of time there. So if you can catch one, you definitely can feel safe if price then boosts out of it quickly. If, on the other hand, you enter in a low volume edge like that, and price, moves against your entry pretty quick, there's a good rule of thumb would be you should know where you're wrong very quickly because of that. Because price can move through low volume edges and low volume nodes so fast, you should have a good idea of where your stop in theory should be, or where you're wrong. Because if it does, let's say, start to move against you, there's a chance it's going to really move against you and price is going to return to a high volume node. So as an entry, yes, it can be a good spot, but it also can blow up quickly in your face if you're not careful with your stop or where your out is on the wrong side. But yeah, I enter in low volume nodes a lot. If you guys ever seen me trade, you know I'm more of a rotational trader. I stink at breakouts. So even breakdowns at times, you know, if it was to flush through a low volume node, I may be looking for us to potentially rebid off of it instead. It's just the nature of, you know, me kind of trading low volume nodes into higher volume nodes. That's just kind of my style. So it's the same thing there. If you enter in one, you should know where your out is, and you should be looking to potentially take profit around a point of control or around a high volume edge. And then continuing in a week like this, where if you entered the low volume area, you know, down towards 5610, 5600, you'd be looking to start taking profit probably around our week pivot for this week, 5630. That would be, you know, if you're looking for that full traverse of value, that 20 points that you may get longing off 5610, that's where you'd start peeling off, looking for sellers to potentially defend that high volume node. And, you know, do we continue to balance in there? But that's kind of how I use it. So is Delta by price a built-in indicator in MotiveWave, or is it through a third party? So there is if you're using MotiveWave or you've used it in the past, it's not necessarily, it's not a specific indicator, I guess is the first thing, that I can say. It's something called volume imprint in MotiveWave. And then you have to kind of move around to the Delta screen and then kind of build it. If you're curious, if you actually are using MotiveWave and you want my settings, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram or on X or in Discord if you can find me. I'm happy to screenshot my settings for you, and you know, help you build it out if that's what you're actively using to if you're actually using MotiveWave. So happy to do it. Hey Nick, what is a rotational trade? So a rotational trade, I mean, in theory, could be a range trade. It's just a term that I use. But you're looking for basically a rotation. I use the word rotation a lot, but you're looking for a move, let's say, out of, like we just talked about, out of a low volume node into a higher volume node. And if you look at data, rotations can be anywhere between, you know, 5 points on ES, can be 30 to 60 points on NQ. It really depends on your time frame that you're kind of looking for. But some of those intraday, as you would call them, like those momentum moves up, down, as the market kind of, you know, moves in. If you were to look at a 1 hour chart or a 30-minute chart, if you get out of your 5 minute or 1 minute, like some of us crazy people do to execute on NQ, if you look at a longer time frame, you'll see that the market doesn't just go up, down, up, down, up, down, you know, every other candle. It tends to move in, you know, rotations on like a 1 hour time frame. So if you were looking for more of some people use the term measured move, that's the same type of logic where, you know, if I'm scalping, for me on NQ, it's like 20 to 30 points. If I'm looking for a rotation, it may be more 60 to 100. It just kind of depends on, you know, the time frame, where we were trading, where I entered, and, you know, kind of what my plan is. But I use the term rotation, but it's kind of like a measured move that we may get in a specific time frame. But yeah, guys, that's the prep. That's this week. We're still in balance. That's the big summary here, guys. There's not a ton that I am personally looking to do just yet. This is going to be a long week, I have a feeling. I think we're going to start to see some volume return. Maybe the VIX will become real again, and we can make volatility great, and we can all have some fun into what is historically the best trading time of the year, being September and October. Just tends to be more volatile, tends to be wider ranges. The VIX tends to perk up, and into an election cycle, hopefully we're on the very, you know, the cusp of seeing that again. So with that logic being said, that is why I'm not looking to do a whole lot until we break this range, because I can take daily loss limits, you know, in the early parts of this week, trying to, you know, trade around 5630 and, you know, dig yourself into trouble to start the week. And then volatility returns, or we finally get a break of this balance. And I'm sitting on my hands because I've taken losses this week, and I have to be strategic instead of, you know, really playing some of these more outside moves that we may get once we do finally break this balance. So I say that just being, we're coming off a holiday. We may start a week a little weird, a little quiet, but better trade locations are going to come this week. There's no way we continue to trade in this balance right now. I think we're going to finally break it. I just don't know what's going to do it or when it's going to happen, but I'm trying not to screw myself up so that I have no ammo in the chamber when we do finally break it. So I would caution everybody to, be a little selective this week. At least, if you're going to trade it, trade the edges. If you're going to trade for the breakout, I think that's totally fine. If we can get above 56.60 with a little enthusiasm, if we can trade above, last week's range, by all means, take the range play, or not the range play, take the breakout play and see if you can catch it. But until then, sit on your hands. That's my advice. We'll have some fun this week. There's no question, but it's definitely going to be a long, short week, as Dee has just said in the chat. But yeah, guys, we're coming in at the top of the hour, or I guess not the top of the hour. I forgot we start 15 minutes early, but we're coming in to an hour here. I hope this was helpful. I'll hold for another couple questions if there are any. If not, I really, really do thank everybody for tuning in, for taking some time out for our U.S. friends. If you are tuning in and you took away from your Labor Day Sunday, your barbecue, your ice cold beers, whatever you had on this first weekend of college football here in the U.S., I do thank you. Hopefully everyone got some value out of this. Everyone learned what a multi-week balance is this week and why they can be mind-numbing at times and make you want to pull your hair out. But do know better trade locations are coming. Some volatility hopefully is coming, and we can have some fun this week. But as a reminder, there is no slow markets tonight. I think Dakota is enjoying a nice break on his Labor Day weekend. Dee, I don't think are you doing London Open tonight, or are you waiting until tomorrow at 3 a.m.? My time's all weird. But there's no TopstepTV tomorrow. Everyone's getting a nice, lovely, much needed day off for the team behind the scenes that I know everyone does not necessarily know, but everyone's getting a much needed break. Dee is still doing the London Open, so do tune into her. But if not, I believe Dakota will be back tomorrow night with slow markets to once again probably dissect this little weird half open that we have tonight and for the first half of tomorrow during the day. But we will get plenty of trades this week and we'll have plenty of fun. And I really do thank you all for tuning in. And I will see everybody bright and early on Wednesday morning on Fast Markets. So enjoy the rest of your Labor Day. Enjoy the limited trading session tomorrow morning if you are going to trade it. But if not, we will be back Tuesday morning at 8:30 with a vengeance. So cheers. Everyone have a good night.